So I have a question. What do the following originators and great leaders have in common? Craig Strent, Josh Mettle, Ryan Grant, Tyler Osby, and Caleb LeGrand. The answer is they're all members of the Leadership 360 family. And they've all graduated from the L360 Signature Program, a one-year coaching program that includes an 8-day business and life planning retreat in Costa Rica and a 4-day implementation retreat in Malibu, along with one-on-one and group coaching for an entire year. Gang, this is the only one-on-one coaching that I do. So if you want to have an opportunity to work with me, this would be about how you go about doing that. There's nothing like it, I can assure you of that. We've been perfecting and evolving this for over a decade now. The program is exclusive to only 12 people annually. That's it. And there are 3 of us as coaches, myself, Scott, and Julie, that work intimately with our clients for a 1-year period of time. Apply now so we can get to know each other a little bit and assess whether there's a mutual fit. And the way that you do that is you go to leadership360now.com. Once again, leadership360now.com, or you can click on the link in the show notes of this episode. That's leadership360now.com. And for more information, if you want to see what the current group is experiencing, we've asked them to record some testimonials. They're also in the show notes of this episode as well. I hope that you enjoy today's episode of the 360 Experience. Welcome to the 360 Experience. I am your host, Tim Braheem, and today's episode is with someone who needs no introduction within the realms of the mortgage space. Barry Habib has been a legend within the mortgage industry for about 25 years now. If you're not in the mortgage space, I want to certainly tell you a little bit about him. He is the CEO of MBS Highway, which is the top educational platform within the mortgage industry to teach mortgage professionals about the financial markets and the trading of mortgage-backed securities and the fluctuations in interest rates. Obviously, with inflation and things of that nature, this is an invaluable resource at this time. He's also an American entrepreneur, a number 1 Amazon best-selling author of Money in the Streets, which is a terrific book that many people have shared with me that they enjoy. Widely credited was Barry for having a huge impact. He testified in front of the Federal Reserve during the beginning of the pandemic in 2020 when the financial markets were on edge. The Fed was pumping a lot of liquidity into the system, and the mortgage industry was on thin ice, so to speak, because of potential margin calls. And his testimony to the Fed was widely credited with kind of settling down the mortgage-backed securities market. Additionally, he is a former mortgage professional. He funded over $2 billion in mortgage production in his career. And I think beyond all of that, Barry is just an incredibly articulate, knowledgeable, and educated man who does an absolutely incredible job of teaching in a wide variety of different aspects of business and in life. So without further ado, please enjoy my episode with Barry Habib in the 360 Experience. What's up, Barry?
Well, it's so good to see you, buddy.
Happy holidays and happy New Year. And this is being shown or listened to in early January. We're right before New Year's, but happy holidays, bro.
Thank you. Let's have a great year together, right? It's seems like the months and years just keep turning a lot faster each time.
Yeah, they're not slowing down for us. I mean, we got to keep up the pace, right?
Yes.
So I want to just kind of take a little bit of a different approach just to get started. Let's just talk a little bit about our history together. I mean, we've had some good times together back about 20 years ago. One of the things that I know about you, I think a lot of people know about you, but man, you love to laugh. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy very much about you. We've had some fun laughs and shared some very enjoyable TV shows, et cetera, over the years. So, man, it's good to be reconnected with you, and thank you for being here. And I know that this is just going to be super fun. So really welcome to the episode.
Yeah, we've had a lot of laughs and a lot of jokes. I mean, that's one of the best things in life, right? Is to laugh. So it's important that we try and do that all the time. And yeah, a lot of memorable TV shows. You turned me on to quite a few good ones, bro. You turned me on to The Offer. The last time we were on together, and man, I devoured that thing. It was so good. I loved it. It's on Paramount Plus. It was wonderful. So
fascinating documentary. And, those people that are listening that have known you and I for years, on stage and all that kind of stuff, may not be aware of how sick our sense of humor can be sometimes. I think we share that as a common denominator. And man, laughter is really a medicine, isn't it? I mean, I love how you use laughter when you speak. How do you source that stuff? Like, I mean, you must spend a lot of time finding like the right clips and, just funny cutaways and stuff to infuse in your presentation.
It's interesting in that I don't actually look for it, but when I find something or when I hear something, and I think this is just a universal way that I look at things in general. And it's one of the things I'd love for people to, perhaps if you're not doing it already, to start doing it, is don't just learn to consume. Don't just observe or enjoy to consume. And I know you do this all the time, Tim, is when you find something or you come upon something or you hear something or you listen to something or you read something, take it in for a minute, really understand it, and then figure out a lens that you could share it with others. And because you and I are on stage and we do a lot of videos, it's easy to do. Like I do a daily update every day, so we have ways that we can get that out there. But if I find something that I can relate it to what we do in our industry or to our audience, that's something that I really think about consuming it with that lens. Most of the time we don't consume it with that lens. We consume it with a oh, this is just going to be great for me to take in, and it's enjoyable, or it's funny, or it's interesting, or I've learned something. But take it in, and then you have to really digest it, because it's different than just consuming it than it is to take it in a way that allows you to digest it and think about it. And how can I then teach this or relate it to what we're doing or make it analogous to what we're doing? So yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up here right away, because it's an important lesson. I think if we want to make our experiences with others, make it memorable for them, become more magnetic, these are the types of things that we want to do. Look, when you come in contact with people, if you make them feel better, you make them feel smarter, they will be drawn to you, which is the definition of being magnetic.
I love where we got started here. This is I do this stuff inherently all the time too, like you're describing. And I guess the thing that I would want to add to that is just make sure that you understand that, people are people and people have interests. I mean, you find something cool about kids, you find a great show. I mean, just the loan officer with the most friends wins. I mean, if we're talking the mortgage business, if we're not talking the mortgage business, it's whatever business you're in. I mean, the more relationships you have, the more successful you're going to be. I mean, I actually want to dive down that rabbit hole with you in just a minute about like how you cultivate relationships, because I think you're better at it than most anybody I know. And the other day, you and I were talking and you just like dropped the fact that you know Tony Robbins. I'm like, shit, man. I mean, I'm not surprised, but like I want to hear that story. So one other thing though, before we go there, is how do you capture it? Like, do you have a mechanism for capturing content and organizing it in some way, or is there a system there, or is it just like you capture it, you digest it, and then you think immediately about who could benefit from this and you pump it out? Like, how does that work?
So let's just say if it's something that I'm reading, what I'll do is I'll think about it, but don't just like read it quickly. Like I'll have to actually stop and just think about it so I can understand the mechanism of it, and really kind of break it down and understand it. And then I try and take it a step further. I mean, do I agree with this? Do I disagree? What's some holes I could poke into? So it takes me a little bit of a longer time to read through stuff that's interesting. And there's people that I really respect that their points of view are really good, and I've become good friends with many of them. John Malden's a brilliant writer, and he's a great thought leader. David Rosenberg, who I don't always agree with, but I think he's got a really good sense of insights. And while I don't agree, I admire his ability to go beneath the surface and dig things out. And that makes me question, am I right in my belief, or do I even feel more conviction because I could see where I disagree with him? Peter Bookvar is another one. And, there's several of them, Lacey Hunt, people that I really respect. So when I read their stuff or listen to them, I try to go slow mentally, just like dial it down to where the intake comes in slower, so I could really go through it, understand it. And then the best way we learn is by teaching, right? So So a lot of times I'll just talk to somebody about it because that helps me process it better, and it'll help me. And so Dan and I work close together. So, or it could be Dan, it could be anybody within the company. I'll talk it through with them. Or I have a great sounding board because when we do our daily updates, there's 5 of us that get on camera, but there's really like 9 of us that put it together. So just an interesting thing. So today I'm watching CNBC, and they started talking about Southwest, right? And everybody's been crapping all over Southwest because they canceled so many flights. And clearly it is annoying as heck to have your holiday plans ruined because of canceled flights. But what they don't understand is the mechanism of it, right? So I was just curious about it because I like to research things. So, and because I fly so much, this is important to me. Most airlines, your Deltas, your Americans, your Uniteds, they use a system for how they get there with hub and spoke. So you have a hub, and Newark, New Jersey is a hub, and most of the time I'm in Florida, so you got Americans in Miami. But when you take this hub and spoke system, if you live in a spoke in a hub, you can pretty much get anywhere in a direct flight. And I know, fly a lot. I fly a ton, so it really sucks to take connecting flights because whatever could go wrong, you now doubled your chances, right? And it just sucks. It sucks. It makes everything longer. It's miserable. So direct flight's always better. But let's just say if you're in a remote location, not maybe necessarily remote, but you just don't have a hub where you are, which a lot of cities are. You oftentimes, to get to a non-hub area to make that trip, you've got to take a connecting flight because it's difficult. You have to and really go out of your way to go to a hub, and then from there go to one of their outlets. And I know it's a long way to explain it, but it's just follow me for a second here mentally. So when you do the research, you then understand that, okay, so everybody could shit all over Southwest, but Southwest doesn't have a hub. Picture a bus that makes all these stops along the way. So they're going from like remote location to remote location and making these connections, which nobody else does. Now that works beautifully because you're doing work nobody else does. So it's great for business, but there is logistically difficult times, like when there are cancellations. The reason it's harder on them is because they don't have a hub that they can make replacement parts, replace the aircraft, replace the crew, they're dependent on the next bus stop or the next bus stop because the FAA only allows you to fly a specific amount of hours. There's very strict restrictions. You have to have rest. So their crew gets picked up on one of these bus stops as well as passengers. So it's not like a hub where there's a lot of interchangeable parts. So if one area gets stopped, well, then all the other stops are going to get screwed. It's not like the hub and spoke. So while everybody's shitting all over Southwest, what they don't realize is if you're going to say, okay, they got to pay for this, they got to do this, well, then you just screwed yourself because now you're going to have to take connecting flights because if you put them in a bad spot and overrate. So I know that it's a long way to go about it, but what I try to do is see things that are not obvious. And it's just training your mind to think deeper. Like when the headline says this, don't take it at face value. Understand why they're saying that, because what you really will notice is that you are all so much smarter than the people who are relaying the news and can because they don't research it. They just spit it back out, and they're going to spit it out in a way that gets the most headlines, which is going to be the nastiest, dirtiest way to do it.
I love that. All of that. I want to comment on just a couple of things. First of all, I thought I was going to have to text you last night and tell you I have to reschedule this conversation because my flight with Southwest coming back from Salt Lake to LA got canceled. Fortunately, I got on a red eye with Delta. But that's a great example because, I was like, wow, their systems are really beat up and what happened here? But I didn't understand the whole hub and spoke thing, and it totally makes sense to me. But what I'm really hearing at a broader level in what you're sharing is that you're incorporating curiosity into your everyday way of being. And that's such a virtue. I don't think that people use the word or contemplate the word curiosity enough, because curiosity is the springboard for growth. I mean, when we're kids, we're curious and we grow a lot. we evolve, we try new things, etc. The older we get, we tend to get very set in our ways, very closed, and we don't embody this incredible virtue of curiosity. And what I'm hearing is that you're always curious. That's what's making you always learn. And then I'm going to guess and comment on this, that you then turn around with that curious learning and then use it to teach. And as a result of teaching, completely broaden your network. And if that is true, what I'd love to talk to you next a little bit about is networking, because this isn't a topic, it's a science, I think. And there's a system and a philosophy to it. I don't consider myself to be a good networker. I in the past was much more introverted, so that wasn't really my thing. But I don't consider you to be introverted, and I think you're a master networker. So comment on anything that I just shared if you want, but also like if you want to take it down the networking route and how you meet people and all that would be great.
Well, so one thing, Tim, you have a very high likability quality. People just like you, and that's just because the way you are. You always are. There's the old saying is, if you want to be interesting, be interested. So I think one thing of many, many, many things that you do extremely well is you are interested. And that's an important aspect of being likable, because, if you show an interest in someone, and that's important. So all of us that are in sales, it's important to be interested. It's easy to get into the whole thing about yourself, and while that's okay, and people want to learn about you, right? But you should also be interested in others. So that's a critical element to increasing your likability qualities. Now, as we try to network with others, that magnetism is very important. And you can't give what you don't have. So that means you have to put work into networking before you do it. When I would go to an event, I would actually try and get pictures of people that I wanted to meet so I could recognize their face and I knew what to go. And I'd actually do a little research on them. So now, if you don't want to go to those extremes so that you can be an effective networker, then at least ask the questions like you do, Tim, and being interested. And then you learn so much about someone, and then you could follow up. You find points where you could be having that relatable quality with that individual. And then I think it's also important for us to do the best we can to plant seeds when the ground is fertile. Unwanted advice is oftentimes resented. So you have to be careful, because sometimes if you try to be helpful and offer advice, it can be taken the wrong way. So I always like to start by asking questions. And then if you learn something where your experience has been able to be helpful there, maybe you could just relate it to your experience. And, well, because you said this, I can relate to that. And, what I wound up doing is I wound up doing this. And it's not you're giving advice, you're just sharing an experience. And that then might give them something that they can learn with. So I think that you're right. It is an art form. The only way you get better in the art form is to continuously trial and error, practice. And as you practice, make sure you're sensitive to the feedback you're getting. Pick up on the body language, pick up on the follow-ups. The person doesn't have to just walk away from you and run, for you to get the vibe that what you're saying isn't making sense. But are they looking elsewhere when they're talking to you? Are they engaged? Because if you're talking about things that they're interested in, they're certainly going to be engaged with you. And if you're boring the shit out of them, they're going to, their mind's going to wander. And you can see that if you're picking up on the cues.
Shit, man. There was a lot of gold in those 3 minutes there. Like, you said a whole bunch of things. Like, this is definitely something that I want to encourage everyone to rewind that, listen to that again. There's probably like 10 critically important things that you said. And I just learned a lot. Yeah. Picking up on the cues, knowing when to overstate your welcome, but like also, there's also this element you find when you talk with people sometimes, especially strong personalities. And I have to be careful of this myself, that like the person's insecurities of wanting to be important are kicking into this quote unquote networking engagement. And what they're actually really doing is one-upping. They're like telling like some, if I'm networking with you, you're sharing with something with me that's meaningful to you. And then I'm not really listening. I'm thinking about how I can like tell my story that's just as good, and that's not that's not going to connect you with people when it comes to networking. I love the pictures of people in advance so you can recognize them, doing a little bit of homework on them. And what do you save that to your phone or something? So when you go to an event, you have that dialed in?
Well, God bless me with a pretty good memory. So, I'll look at them before. I haven't done this in a bit, but I used to. If there was an event that I wanted to go to and there was people that I really wanted to meet and talk to, do a little research about them so that some commonalities that I could find. And also, you know what? Show them the respect of that. Look, I care enough about wanting to meet you that I've done a little research. That's very flattering to somebody, quite honestly, I really care about this. This is important to me. You're someone that I really want to meet. And I've actually, spent a little bit of time learning about you. Because look, if you meet an important person, think about how, from their ego's point of view. So what do? Meanwhile, they're one of the top people in their field or whatever it is. So if you do a little bit of research on who the important people are that you'd like to meet with, and you understand a little bit about them, then it shows that you've put the time in. It gives them the respect that they've worked so hard to earn. If I would go to some conferences sometimes, where there'd be a lot of top level money managers or investors, and they're quite impressed when you know a little bit about them, a little bit about who they are. I'm not saying you want to stalk them or whatever, but just learn a little bit about them so they know, oh yeah, and that book that you wrote was great, or I understand, I was very interested when you spoke about this, and just to break the ice a little bit and allow you to have a conversation that goes a little bit deeper than the superficial. How's the weather?
Yeah, you don't want to say anything like, so how's, Carol, referencing their wife.
I agree. Yes.
It's a little creepy at that point,
creepy.
Right? And we move into the creepy realm. I just wanted to make sure that we define the boundary there. So,
yes.
Okay. So, but what about likability factor? I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but it's interesting, man. Over the years I remember people that I worked with when I was an originator there were colleagues of mine, and, all the way through the present, where it's just no matter what strategy you give to them to deploy, no matter what materials, marketing, education, information, if you don't have that likability factor, it really kind of wrecks everything, right? And do you have anything to say about that? How to cultivate a likability factor?
I do. I'm dating myself, but there was a show, Columbo, back in the day where, he was just a brilliant detective, but he would never show it as he was brilliant. He'd always he made it like he wasn't as smart as he was. And sometimes if you're too polished, you're too perfect, you're too slick, that doesn't help your likability quality because people just can't relate to that. Okay. So you have to take the edge off of that a little bit, and don't be afraid to show your flaws and to show your weaknesses, because we all have them. There's all things that we all suck at. We all struggle with, there's all things. And I think sharing that humanizes you and allows the person to feel more comfortable around you, because, even if you are very successful, you can be intimidating to somebody else, and it can make them self-conscious of their own shortcomings, as opposed to if you humanize yourself. And we're not that different. I happen to be okay or good at this, but there's a lot of things I'm not, and there's a lot that I need to learn, is the attitude that you should go into things with. Because no matter how successful we are, we all suck at a lot of things. We all can be better at a lot of things. And I think that if you just keep an even mindset about it and understand that we're all trying to figure this out, as you say, Tim, we're all trying to learn and get through this together. And, one thing we have to understand too is no matter who you are, we will all suffer, right? We will all suffer. We'll all have hardships. We'll all going to go through some difficult times. No matter where you are, no matter what you've done, we will all suffer. And that's a great connector for us, is understanding the human side of things, is that we all can use help. We all can use encouragement. Confidence is very fragile. And by the way, and don't be schmoozy, don't bullshit, don't it's nice to be kind. It's nice to be gracious, but people could read through if it's thick bullshit. Okay. There's a line that comes between, being gentle and kind and nice and, and emphasizing some nice things. And then it's like going overboard. So you got to walk that line.
Yeah. And I'll just add one other thing, is just be you,
Yes.
it's pretty, for you, I think that it kind of really boils down to maybe being self-aware enough to kind of ask yourself the really honest rhetorical question of like, what are my gifts? Like, what are the things that make me special? And how do I cultivate and leverage that to be a good networker? So, you know, you're funny and you're smart. I think those are both truisms. And I would imagine you use both of those, humor, like is a connector, right? Like, so if you
Big
can
time.
say something witty and appropriate and get somebody to let their guard down a little bit and they laugh, you're giving them a gift by making them laugh. But what other gifts can you give them? You can give them the gift of your presence. Some people are like my wife is an example who are just incredibly present, compassionate human being. It's like, it's such a gift to be in the presence of somebody like that. Or my colleague, Julie Wykes, who's one of the great coaches that I've ever known. I mean, that's her superpower, is her presence and her compassion. So, whatever you can bring to the equation, bring it, but then just be you and don't be too forced in your approach is what I'm hearing. Be prepared. Don't be forced is kind of like the summation that I would hear there. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. And when you are you, try to be the best version of you, right? I mean, that's the thing. Don't like you can be a lot of versions of you, right? So it's good to try and always be the best version of you, especially when you're interacting with others. And if you think about it, and just ask yourself this, was that last interaction I have with the person I love, was that the best version of me? Is that the best I could do? Is that the last interaction with my kids, with my parents, with my coworkers? Was that the best version of me in that interaction? And I think that's important. And then, of course, when it comes to the referral source or with the customer, was that the best version of me that I can come up with? Was that the best version of me? And I think when you start to look at things that way, and you want it to be the best version of you, it really increases your likability factor through the roof. If you want to network well, are you the best version of yourself, which means you got to put the work in advance of that, right? So, if you're, because just an example, was the last interaction you had with the customer one where in a mortgage business where you were taking their order, or did you advise them in a way that was extraordinarily meaningful to them? Did you really think about their financial future and understanding market conditions, both on the real estate market and interest rate environment, and what would the drivers be? So those are all things that are very important in the transaction, yet not a lot of people do that well. So don't ever say, well, I just don't do that well. Then get better at it. I mean, nobody came out of the womb understanding what the real estate market was going to do. This is all learned behavior. So just sharpen your skills constantly, and what that does, Tim, is I am convinced that what that does is it breeds confidence. And confidence is that magical aura that surrounds someone that you just want to be close to. Confidence is extraordinarily attractive. It's different than cockiness. Certainly, cockiness we don't love, but confidence, we want to be with someone confident. We want to take advice from somebody confident. Confident to the point where they know that maybe it's not, again, not cocky, understanding that there are variables there, but they have conviction, they have belief, they feel that the odds favor what their point of view is based upon knowledge, experience, work that they put into this. If you were to say to me, I say this when I'm speaking many times, if you were to ask me what was the best presentation I ever gave, I'd want it to be the one I'm doing right now, the best one ever. But I also know that it's not going to be as good as the next one that I'm going to do, because you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get better. I'm going to get sharper. I'm going to learn from everything I do, and I'm going to make improvements. And if we approach relationships that way, it's amazing what starts to happen. I mean, Tim, it's, and you know this because you do this, Tim, that you live this, you breathe this, it's magical how it propels you in life, in career, and in the elusive pursuit of happiness, because you are getting fulfillment from touching other people's lives and making those other people smarter, feel better, happier, have a moment of, of enjoyment, of feeling like I'm learning something, I'm laughing. And that's where that humor comes in too. Remember those jokes, rehearse those jokes, know when to interject them, plant seeds when the ground's fertile.
And also to play off of the confidence piece that you just articulated, it's like, it's important if you're not confident in something to then get curious once again with what is the insecurity that you're feeling? Like, what is it that you're worried about? What are your concerns? Is it a lack of knowledge? Is it a lack of, you don't like the way you look? Is it, there's all kinds of things that we have going on beneath the surface in our thought process that can prevent us from being confident. Really light touch though with it, not like, oh man, I'm so introverted, or I'm not articulate enough. Like, you beat the shit out of yourself, you're going to go in the opposite direction of where we're wanting to go, which is to have confidence and some solidity within yourself, is that like you're good. And that's only going to come from getting curious and not punitive with yourself, and really trying to uncover the areas that you might need to be working on and focusing on. Like you said, I mean, even something is seemingly, unimportant when it would come to sales or networking as the timing of a joke or the cadence of a joke, or maybe even, are there some jokes that I know where I can enter into them intentionally to help break the ice, as a gift to that person. I mean, that's all a part of like putting in the work and time that you're talking about. So speaking of putting in the work and time, let's see how all this magic comes together for a minute. So pick one, if it's okay, pick one very well-known person that we would all know that you feel really good about how you got to know them through like just some of these general networking. You don't have to get into the strategies or anything if you don't want, but like give us a picture of how that works with somebody of prominence.
There's so many of them, right? There's so many of them. Whether
the first one that comes to mind, the one that actually makes you smile and is just a fun story.
Well,
for you
mentioned Tony Robbins, right? So we have become good friends, and he has me speak at some of his events, which is a big honor for me. He usually has me do his platinum partner events, which is like his top level events, and talk about things from an economic standpoint. But with any relationship, what you want to try and do is you want to try and find the way to build that relationship isn't by asking, but it's by giving, it's by offering, so as one of the things I do is as a professional speaker, Tony in my mind is the best professional speaker out there, and what he does is pretty darn incredible. And we've spoken at a few events together, and I told him that, like I admire him so much, and as a speaker, I just think that not only his success, but the way his approach and his command is incredible. I have true admiration for people that are on stage, because I know how hard it is, right, to do that. And that obviously is a nice way to break the ice. But what I did as well is I made it open for him to contact me to provide help. And he's done that so many times, whether it be housing data or interest rate data or things of that nature. And we can all do those things. We all have better expertise than many other people do that we'd like to meet. And sometimes they have needs in that area. So by being that expert and knowing what areas of expertise we have, we can then begin building that relationship by offering help. And he's taken me up on that so many times, whenever he does an event that requires something, knowledge on interest rates or the Fed or housing. I mean, Tony's super brilliant, and he could speak to so many things, but I could play all the voicemails from him. We could trade voice notes a lot back and forth of how he's just blown away by some of the stuff that we bring to him. It's just, it's so nice to have that kind of mutual respect and relationship. But, Mike Roizen at the Cleveland Clinic, always been interested in medicine, and Mike needs to understand a little bit more about finances. He's great with medicine. He's not great with finances. So that's an area that I could help him. And then you build these wonderful mutual relationships, whatever it is. I always look for, how can I help you as the first step? What is it that I can do that could create value or help for you? How can I be a friend to you? And if I show that I don't want anything in return, right? I just want to be a friend to you and just be a good friend, then you teach how powerful the law of reciprocity is. But people want to, and these are people that have achieved high levels of success. So they probably have built in a lot of really good, strong values and understand how to do things well. So they're going to want to do things the right way. They're going to want to build relationships too. So I think if you show people, hey, look, I'm not here to get something from this. I'm here to give to this, nurture a friendship, nurture a relationship. It becomes magical. And that's with anybody.
And, obviously, for those listening, it doesn't have to be somebody as substantial as Tony Robbins. Everybody needs information. Everybody has needs. It's a matter of, as we keep going back to curiosity. It's the right word in this entire conversation so far. You're just evoking curiosity. What do they need? You're asking open-ended questions to yourself and then asking it to them. How can I help this person to connect with them? He is unbelievable. As a speaker, holy shit, man. Quick story there was a guy named Brett Figueroa that used to work for Tony. Oh man, this is going on, 25 to 30 years ago now. And I wanted to learn how to be a speaker. And this guy came in. Tony used to send his army out into a town. I don't know if he still does it, 6-8 weeks in advance, and his army of speakers that would go around and do office presentations and stuff and then sell tickets to his events. So I had this guy in and I connected with him, and next thing you know, I hired him to be like a speaking coach of mine for like 4 weeks. We'd meet twice a week. And then, we finished up by going to Tony's event. I remember, man, just sitting there just in the first row of the audience, just going like, what the fuck, man? This guy is on another planet level. Everything from just him being in such a stream of consciousness, you could just feel it. It's flowing through him, to the longevity of, and the energy that he's able to sustain, and then we hired him, of course, in 2004 for the Lone Toolbox, 2005 for the Lone Toolbox event. So I got to meet him there. But that's such a beautiful story, man. I'm happy for you. Congratulations. It's cool to know Tony Robbins, I would imagine. He's connected to even more people than you, if I must say. So, it's more. Yeah. So it's that makes sense to me that you guys would connect though. And that's awesome that I love the way that you just simply approached of what do I have to offer? And you just kept offering it, and you just started taking you up on it. And before you know it, reciprocity kicks in. So is this when you I don't know that I've ever talked to you about when you were an originator back in the early and mid 90s, even in the late 90s. I believe you stopped in the early 2000s. Was networking your main superpower? And if so, what other things did you do that really well as an originator that you think are important, for people to hear right now, especially?
So when I was in my early 20s, I had started a stereo business. And listen, this was a stereo business where I sold stereos out of the trunk of my car. Okay. So, but build it into a business. And what I had done was I would go around and talk to people. And because I was so young, what I had to make sure that people knew was that I could help them, and I knew what I was talking about. So I devoured everything I could from a knowledge perspective. And I learned at a very early age that if you have knowledge, you can overcome a lot of preconceived notions that people might have. Who is this kid selling out of his car? This kid's so young, what could he know? So you can overcome that with knowledge. So that became a real important thing for me. The other thing I learned was that sometimes when things go wrong, it's an amazing opportunity because things go wrong for everybody, but how do you handle it? So, when something would go wrong with electronics as they do, I would call them immediately. I'd drive out to them. I'd exchange it. I'd fix it, whatever it was. And this person would say, I'm never going to see this kid again, probably, and I'm screwed. And then they would call, somebody would answer, and somebody would actually come out. They almost felt obligated that they had to buy more stuff or tell other people about you. Again, that law of reciprocity. So it was valuable lessons that I learned very early on in my work life. And then when I got into the mortgage business, I just simply took those same things and said, I've got to be really knowledgeable, but not the same knowledge everybody else has. I've got to go deeper. I have to understand how the market affects them, because people would ask questions about that, and most people wouldn't understand it in our business. So I wanted to be certain that I could add value there, and I could be sharp when asked those questions. And I was young at this time. So most of my clients were much older than me, had much more life experience, business experience than I did. So I had to overcome being young and inexperienced with knowledge and confidence. And I was able to do that and turn a lot of those things around. So that was one of the things that certainly helped me. But then networking, networking is so critical. It's so important. People go to events and they think they're networking, but they stay in the same circle. You got to branch out. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. I know people might see me and they see that I'm kind of social, but it's hard to do at any stage. It's hard for me to do sometimes now. It was certainly very hard for me to do early in my career. And I pushed myself to get out of that comfort. You have to kind of push yourself to be uncomfortable. Being comfortable is great, and there's a time and a place for that, but growth only comes from being uncomfortable. That's the only time it comes. So if you push yourself out of that area that you're comfortable with and talk to people, that's the only way you learn. What we have to do, this is in my book, you have to try and suck to then try again and be better. When I first started speaking, Deborah Jones, who gave me my first chance to really be a speaker, she, on a professional level, she said to me one thing, and I'm really dating myself here. We used to sell these cassette tapes, right, of your talks, and she says, "Here, Barry, you're going to remember this, but you get a lot better. Your tapes don't, and you listen back on it, and you cringe, like, oh my God." So, but you have to suck in order to get better. If you keep waiting to try and get better before doing it, you'll never get better, because you have to go through the experience of being lousy at it. You have to do this. It's part of the learning process of getting better. It is like you can't get to the top step without those first low steps where you were down below. You have to do that so that you could build on that. But you only build on it if you take the lessons from it, and if you re-examine it, if you're honest with yourself, if you tweak it, if you get better and better and better. I still do this every day, brother. You can ask. I work with Dan and Diana on my presentations pretty much after every single video that I do, presentation I do live, or the Zoom calls that I do. There's lots of people on these Zoom calls, right? I mean, you could have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people on a Zoom call, but afterwards, before I do the next one, which could be an hour later, it could be a day or two later, I am examining that and making, if I can, it's hard to make notes while you're doing it, but I'll try and have on my side, I use this little remarkable thing that I just quickly put a note. I want to fix that. I want to do that. I can say this better. I can do this better. And it's constantly getting better every single time, no matter how long you've done it, no matter how many times you've done it. And I think originators, your presentation needs to get better every single time. And if it's not, somebody else's is.
Oh, yeah. Mic drop there. Mic drop there. I hope everybody heard that. I mean, first of all, I was thinking about, wow, okay, so maybe that's what's happening here with my third marriage. I sucked in the first two, and I just kept getting better. But in all direct seriousness, I think you just described something so incredibly important. I mean, that's why, that what I call the essential knowledge, primary, base level of growth is critical, because it feeds everything else. You can't be a good salesperson if you don't have knowledge, because you're going to have call reluctance. You're not going to get ROI on your marketing that others would get because you don't have the knowledge. I mean, I guess, what drives you to have that desire to continue to learn and grow and get better? Because what I am aware of is that not everybody is that way. And I'd be curious as to whether you've ever evaluated what is your driving force, or is there a driving force that has you always wanting to improve that maybe others lack?
Well, I think that, again, happiness is very elusive, right? Confidence is elusive. It's very fleeting. And so is happiness. And fulfillment is such an important part of confidence and happiness, and it's feeling good. I mean, let's face it, Tim, we all know this. It feels freaking great to crush it at something. When you do something and it's really good, it just feels so good. And in order to do that, you had to go through a lot in order to get there, right? So it's the process, it's the work that you have to put in, it's all of those things that we all kind of dread a little bit, but that's what makes the reward so beautiful and so wonderful. So knowing that there could be a great payoff over and over and over again, that knowing that you really can change people's mindset in a good way, their life in a good way, um, give them something that they will take with them that's lasting, that's a positive change for them. These things make me and all of us feel great. It doesn't have to be to an audience. It could be to a child that you've done that with. It could be to a person who needs your help. It certainly could be to a referral source that doesn't understand how to answer a client's concerns or questions. It could be to that customer who's confused because what they're hearing and they don't know. But you can really change their life. And if you are taking that approach as an originator, it will help your success in an extraordinary way. And I mean this, every time you meet with a realtor, every time you meet with or any referral source or a customer, are you taking stock in what you just did, the words that came out of your mouth, how you approached it? And are you going back and saying, I'd like to say this way. Here's how I'd like to say, how I'd like to talk about the market today. Are you rehearsing in front of a mirror? I'm not ashamed to tell you that I've done that so many times, or anybody who'd listen for that.
me too, man. A lot of times. Yeah.
Right. No, I know you and I are very similar like that. You and I have run stuff. We run lines with each other to just make sure that we want to sharpen each other, right? And that's what friends do. That's what you should be doing within your office is practicing. It's cool to talk about, the football game is cool to talk about, a show on TV. Great, do that. But it's also really cool to talk about things within the marketplace that can be helpful, that can be intellectually stimulating, but that gives you the practice and the rehearsal. So when you are on the phone or when you are in person, that now you've said this 3 or 4 or 5 times, it's going to come like that to you. And it's going to be sharp and it's going to be smooth. And it's going to give that person the belief that, wow, I'm drawn to this person because they know their shit.
Yeah, it's, that constant tweaking and adjusting and wanting to make it better because you give a shit. Yes. Like, I think that's really, like, we could call it a lot of things, purpose and these things, and they're all accurate phrases. But I think at the bottom line is that you just give a shit. Like for me, I really care about what people's experience is of me. Like, I just care. So I'm going to try to always make a retreat better. If I am going to speak, I'm going to try to do my very best. And one of the things that the guys at Neo do, Ryan Grant, Josh Metal, and Danny Harani, and those guys, they do a lot of what they call game film. So, the person is presenting, to a client at point of sale or to a real estate partner on Zoom. They record it and then they share it. But then they also debrief their own recording, which is your point, right? Like, I mean, that's an advantage that originators have now that they didn't have, or we didn't have when you and I were in the business, is the ability to have video be a commonplace and then to debrief your own presentations. I mean, if you want to get good at your presentations, record them and then listen to them. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but when I was, ever since I was like 8, I wanted to be a sportscaster. When I found out Vin Scully got paid to go to the games and he got to go to the games for free, I was like, that's what I want to do. And I used to drive when I first got my license out to Dodger Stadium or sit in my mom and dad's family room with the door closed and watch a football game on TV. But I'd drive out to Dodger Stadium and I'd sit out in the nosebleeds where there wasn't anybody with an earshot. And I had my old tape recorder and I would record myself calling the game. And then I would listen to it in the car on the way home and try to unlock this code of what I needed to do to be more in cadence. That, how do I fill the dead air time? That phrase right there sounded good. I need to use that more. That one doesn't sound so good. I don't think I should use that one anymore. But it's that self-reflection, which it's that curiosity too, and willingness and wantingness to grow that really had an impact on me in that field. Excuse me, in that field. And I know that it's had a huge impact on you in the way that you present. So
by the way, we share the sportcaster thing. When I was a kid, I used to do the same thing with a little cassette recorder and do that, while watching a game and try and call the game and know the players. But again, even at a young age, what does that mean? You had to do your homework. You had to know
Yeah.
who was what. If it wasn't on your home team, on the visiting team, sometimes you didn't know all the players, especially who the stars were not, not as well known. The stars were well known, but the other players, the supporting players, were not as well known. So you had to do your homework. You had to research. You had to do it. It's all the same things, just as a kid. And by the way, if you didn't start as a kid, it's never too late to learn. It's never too late to just continuously get better. Is it, what can we do now? Well, instead of knowing who the players on the opposing team were that weren't the star players, well, maybe we should know who the members of the Fed are. Maybe we should know, who the influential individuals in business are, that when they say something, it could influence the market. Maybe we should understand some of those economic reports. Maybe we should understand our own market demographics to know that if we're telling somebody that buying a home is a good idea for them, we can say it with conviction and with backup, so that this critical decision that they're making, this financial decision, we can let them know that this truly is an opportunity. Because people turn to you all the time and say, well, what should I do? That just lays it right out there for you. It is such an opportunity, but so many of us squander it because we don't know what to say. They just gave you a chance to win them over. They're like begging you to say, hey, I'm willing to, when they ask you, so what do you think? That's like just being so submissive and saying, I'm ready to give you all my business, tell everybody else about you, and everybody else I know's business, and send it to you. Just answer this question right. And how many people blow that sky high because they get the opportunity and they weren't prepared when they got it.
And there's never been a time like right now for that. Like, I don't think that in all of the years that I've been doing this, there's been a time where this is more ripe for being that person. Because like in '08, yes, there were a lot of people that had a lot of questions about what the hell was going on in the economy. And yes, you did have inside information on that you could have displayed, but you were considered to be a part of the problem. So it was a little bit more challenging. Now you can be the solution for people because everybody's reading about inflation and housing bubbles. And, we saw
the Fed, recession, those four things. So if they're the four most popular Google search terms, shouldn't it occur to you that you should have an expertise in discussing those four topics? All you're doing is giving people what they want. That's all you're doing is filling a need. It's the easiest path to success is fill a need.
It must be hard for you. I want to talk about those folks, that cohort of people, the Fed, in a minute. But before we get over to those guys and gals, I wonder, is it hard for you sometimes to have so many people that have access to an abundance of information that you provide, but they don't take advantage of it in the way that you wish that they would? Is that difficult for you, or?
It's not difficult. It's disappointing that people don't prioritize it. But listen, I get it that we don't know what other people are going through. So I always have that respect. So I start there, is that, maybe they're dealing with a family member in need and that's occupying more of their time. Maybe they have other issues. So we don't know what is going on with people's lives, right? So we have to be respectful for that. But what we could try to do is show them by making this investment, it does have a big payoff. That's what you and I are trying to do right now, right? What we're hoping for right now. We're not doing this because we're getting paid to do this, right? So we're doing this because what we're truly hopeful for is that there are a good percentage of individuals that are watching this. And if you've watched to this stage, you're probably one of them that will take some of these things and gain something or help somebody else from it. And selfishly for you and I, that's what makes us happier and gives us the fulfillment that we want and that we're looking for and that we're striving for. Listen, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's funny the way God puts you in situations and things that happen. So, my parents were much older when I was born. My dad was 57, my mom was 40. My dad passed away when I was just a young boy. And we were extraordinarily poor. So I know what it's like. So yeah, there's a desire to try and help people because I know what it's like to be really poor. But there was also, and when I was a kid, so my parents were immigrants. I'm first generation here. So my parents didn't speak the language. And, so it was hard on them. My mom worked in a sweatshop and people were also meaner back then than now. You didn't have the same social concerns that people have today that you did back then. And, I had mostly hand-me-downs and things like that. So kids can be mean, kids can make fun. So I always felt like, was I good enough? Right. And I think in some crazy way, maybe God puts you in these circumstances so that acts as a driving factor to always be better, to always prove to yourself that you can constantly be better. And, sometimes when people are handed a lot of things, not saying that makes somebody better or worse, but maybe they don't have that, I've got to really push to earn it, Um, so it's why as you have some success, and I've always been careful about this with my kids, is you want to make them happy, you want to some extent spoil them, but you also need to dial it back a little bit too, and make sure that there's some balance there in what you're doing for them.
Super beautiful, man. It's almost like the more that you have to endure, the more that your bandwidth of endurance gets stretched. I don't know if that's the way I would really want to say that, but I'll go with that for right now. It's almost like working out, right? Like, I mean, if you're constantly just going to the gym, curling 10-pound dumbbells, 4 sets of 20 reps, that is your capacity essentially, because your muscles have never had to endure something like a heavy weight. But if you go through a heavy weight type experience in your life, like being made fun of or not having enough, it can shape you into being, appreciative. And also in some cases, I would imagine, it holds true for me, trying to prove myself, and then the juxtaposition of like, because usually where trying to prove myself leads for most people is a imbalance in their approach to life, because they're constantly having to re-extend the finish line to try to continually prove themselves over and over. And I find that for me, it was like the ability to start to shift, and I'm not there yet, but I'm going there too. I'm not proving myself, I'm helping people. Like, that's what the driving force is behind what I'm doing now. It's not to prove myself as being worthy to the world and for everybody to be like, hey, look at you. Congratulations. You retired when you're 40 and you moved to Italy and all this shit. Like, cause like, then what? Right. Cause then you got to like set a new goal and a new finish line. And at some point in time, we're like, wait a minute, I got to wake up to the fact that this is fucking exhausting. And there's maybe a different perspective to this, which could be, how can I use my gifts that I've learned through these 50 some odd years of going through it and redirect the energy and the intention behind it to helping others? What would it be like to have an ally, a partner, somebody who knew you well, who could help you see clearly the pathway to your success in your business and your life, how to develop relationships with referral partners, how to cultivate borrowers from your past client database, and how to create new opportunities in this down market? The Performance Accelerator private one-on-one coaching program is that program. It pairs you with a certified, highly skilled coach who will help you in designing the future that you want and need. Go to www.mortgagecoachingnow.com and click on Get a Coach to register for your free exploratory session. Or you can click on the link in the description to this podcast.
I want to share one thing that just came to mind as you were talking, but it also builds empathy, right? Because we can be bitter and resentful for the shit that the shit hand that we've been dealt, or like I start every day with gratitude. It's the first thing I do in the morning. I just in the shower, like I literally say out loud all these amazing things that I thank God for. I thank my parents for, like all the sacrifices that they made and all these things that I am so blessed to have. And I think when you start your day like that, and you start from appreciation. So even though these things were struggles and they were tough, and people have gone through much worse than me, if you can be appreciative of it, then it makes it easier to be empathetic towards others. And I just wanted to share a quick story. So now Dan and Nicole, everybody knows Dan that watches MBS Highway, but his twin sister, Nicole, who's wonderful. She's an originator. And so Dan and Nicole, when they were little kids, they had some friends come over, and I guess they were talking and this and that. And you know how little kids can be, right? So now, while I tried not to spoil them, I was doing well, and I because I was divorced, maybe I indulged a little bit with them, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, we have that, and they don't have that, and this and that, ha ha," like that kind of a thing, like kids do, right? And again, this is where you plant the seed when the ground is fertile, right? So it was just the right time, and I wanted to just impart a little bit of experience for me to them. And I said, Dan, Nicole, I said, if you're going to make fun of them, that's where daddy was. So if you make fun of them, it's like you're making fun of daddy. And you could see their faces like, and they never again, I get like emotional even thinking about the moment that it was, because it was such an important moment for them. Never again ever had that thought or attitude. And it helped them become more empathetic. So I think these types of important lessons that we can teach kids, that we can teach our friends, where we can show that empathy from our experience is absolutely critical.
Yeah, I think the part about modeling it for them is also, a really a key thing, right? I mean, it's one thing to talk about empathy. You can certainly insert people into circumstances that will evoke empathy, but if you, especially with your kids, if you model it, and there's just a lot of little things. I won't go down this rabbit hole too deep, but there's just a lot of little things that I would have my kids do, when they were young, to try to instill in their consciousness the fact that they are very blessed, but without saying you're blessed. I mean, a lot of times parents are, do you realize how good you have it? And then it becomes like a punitive thing versus, hey, you see that man over there? He's really unhappy and he's really sad. And, like this person on the street, and, go give him this dollar and hand it to him. It's safe. It's okay. And like, so they can feel the energy of somebody else who might not be in as good of a circumstance as them.
My mom did that with me, Tim. I remember riding the subways, and we were dirt poor, but when my mom would see somebody that was, in tough spot, she would take her little change purse out and give them some change. And then she would tell me, she says, it's good to help people. I said, so God sees you help people. So it's good to help people. But just at an early age to teach you that it's important, no matter where you are. And we were pretty low on the totem pole, okay, financially. But there's always somebody going to be higher. There's always going to be somebody worse off, and what we can, you should be reaching higher, but also do it by extending a hand to help pull people up with you. I think it's really important.
Is your mom still alive?
No, she passed away several years ago, back in 1996. She got a first class ticket to heaven. That woman, she was wonderful. She was a wonderful woman.
Wow, man. I guarantee your parents are proud of you, man. Like,
Oh,
I mean, wow. Like what an incredible journey you've been on that has been, a part of it is helping people, but a lot of it's helping your family. And I'm sure that they're just super proud watching down on you. Speaking of which, you went through a tough time in your life, not that many years ago, with a health issue. Is that something that you are open to sharing? And if so, what did you learn from it?
So I put it in my book, was the first time I talked about it, but I never really wanted sympathy, and I never wanted to like play the card like, oh, feel sorry, but back about 10 years ago, it was August of 2012, August 20th of 2012 at 6:00. I got a test result saying that I had non-Hodgkin's follicular lymphoma, and I had to ask 3 times before the doctor said it's cancer. So it's a weird thing that happened from eating out a lot because I was speaking so much. I had this H. pylori, which is so easy to cure with antibiotics, but if you let it fester, like 2% of people wind up getting this type of cancer. So ding, 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 I won. But I learned all I could about it, and you don't do anything with it. I still have it, but it is not aggressive. If it gets aggressive, I know what we have to do. We have to take steps to address it, but we monitor it every 6 months. I go for blood and tests, and then every year I go for scans. And so we just keep a very close watch on it. But it also really changed a lot for me, where I kind of, realized perhaps how finite things can be and how quickly things can change. So I tried, I'm still a work in progress in so many ways, but I tried to be more appreciative of things. in moments that you can really appreciate and have. So, and I work on trying to be more present. I'm not, that was one of the things God did not bless me with, was that ability. I guess I'm very aware, and I'm easily distracted by other things that go on. It's good in certain ways, but I work on trying to be more present. But listen, we all have things we try and get better with, right? And that's something I work on to try and get better on.
Well, the issue of presence is a bit of a counterforce, or can be a counterforce, to being strategic and curious, right? I mean, like, if you've got that curious boy inside of you that's always wanting to learn and grow and get better and teach and share, and that we've talked about in the first hour or so of this conversation, and that is a counterforce to being still inside. We all have our growth edges that we need to lean into and try to find some equilibrium with. I back to the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I mean, wow. I mean, it must be like every 6 months, it must be like, a little bit of a tense time for you, or are you able to just go into that and not really think about it?
I try not to think about it and dwell on it. I know it's there, but when I go for the blood test every 6 months, I really just try and have a very positive feeling about it. I feel like, this is going to be good news, and I feel great. And if it's not the news that I want, then we're going to approach it and we're going to take care of it with whatever we got to do. And we're not going to let it stop me. So that's the approach that I go in, and I just go in, get my blood drawn. And then 10 minutes later, Dr. Bilar comes in, and, so far so good. He says, we're all good. He says, how you feeling? They kind of feels me up for all my lymph nodes and tickles the heck out of me. But, I'm actually close with my doctor too, and that's another thing, build relationships, right? So if you need to ask questions, you could call him. I mean, I sing in a band. He's come to some of my events, so try and build relationships with people that are, they don't just have to be strategic for business, that you should have these strategic relationships for whatever it is. God's put these people in your life, and it's up to you to cultivate that, to recognize that there's not coincidences. At least I don't believe that. There's a reason that things are the way they are. And if you just can look a little bit deeper, and you can take yourself to just an entirely different level of enjoyment in life and fulfillment in life, if you just understand that the universe has put things out there for you, and it's up to you to look a little bit deeper and see that, and not take it as a coincidence, and look at these signs and work on these things.
Sounds like, first of all, like the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in many ways is one of your great teachers in your life curriculum, because you shared that you are always working on trying to cultivate more presence, and yet it seems as if this ailment requires you to be present and maybe not get too far over your skis because of the circumstances associated with any kind of an illness, right? That could be fatal, and you just have to stay present and not think about it and all that. So it's a great teacher to you. I think maybe a long time ago I mentioned this guy to you, but I don't remember. Do you know who Dr. Joe Dispenza is?
Yes.
Did you ever read
He wrote the book Supernatural, right?
Becoming Supernatural. Yeah. Did you read that book?
I did. I listened to the audiobook. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah. I've been to 2 of his 1-week retreats, and I had him as a guest speaker at our master's retreat about 2.5 years ago. So I'm a big fan and a student of his for sure. And I do all of his, that's really the only meditation that I've done in the last 3.5 years is just Dr. Joe every morning. It's some pretty interesting science. The more that you get curious with it and start really looking at it. Even some of the things that you're talking about, like I'm just trying to be positive with it. It's like having a healthy relationship with it is very important, because that's energy that you're putting towards either healing, or if you're coming under the hormones of stress and fear and all that kind of stuff, then you're actually potentially exasperating the situation. So sounds like you learned some of that on your own or through listening to his book.
I'm not so sure I'm good at it, Tim, but I'm trying. And with anything else, like it's so funny. You could look at people that you potentially we all can look up to, or we all can say, oh wow, they've achieved this, but all of us suffer, like well, all of us have been dealt cards that are good, and we have to recognize that, but we've all been dealt some cards that are shitty too, all of us, everybody. And I think the difference is work on the shitty cards that you have to make it better, but also cultivate the good cards that you have, because everyone has them in certain ways. And I think that's what makes you happier, is to improve those cards that are, and to do that, you got to do all those things you said. You talked about, the game film, right? I mean, one of the things we always did, and I would teach it, is to record your conversations. I'm old school, so because I originated back when you could actually record instead of the videos of it, record your conversations. Listen, it's painful, but you can get better from that. And these are things that help you grow. So take the things that you're not as good at, make them better. Take the things that you are very good at, or have some get excited doing, or talking about, or working on, and just cultivate that, work on that, make that better, and make those your superpowers. And these are things that we just have to do, if we want to realize the potential that we all have.
Speaking about things that you are good at and that you're excited about, I think that falls into the category of mortgage-backed security trading, the economy, the Federal Reserve, and educating people on those topics. And there's nobody better at it than you. You've been doing it for ages. Still remember that time, by the way, when you got me on CNN FN with you in New York. I believe Martha McCallum was the host, if I'm not mistaken. And when I got my 2 minutes of fame, or whatever it was, when the camera was on me and I was on national television because you put me on there, at the end, my nervous twitch was that I winked at her. I don't know if you remember that. And it was on camera, and she had like a weird look on her face, like, why is this dude winking at me? And a couple of my friends saw it live, and they're like, man, that was like hilarious.
Well, that was good, man. You're a stud. Winking at Martha McCallum.
So this is going to be
even better was her wink back. That was even better.
No, she didn't wink back. Man, if looks could
kill, you should have just went with it. You should have just went with it.
Yeah. If looks could kill, I wouldn't even be here with you right now. So, so we're going to be airing this in January of 2023. It's a crazy time right now in the economy. There's just so many conflicting reports, yet most of them are jaded towards the negative, towards recession, and all the buzzwords that we talked about, the top 4 Google searches. Give us an update, if you would, please. First of all, maybe just a quick overview in terms of a macro lens of what is happening in the economy right now. And then, if you would please, take us to where you think we're going in the next 6 and 12 months, if you're willing to go out that far.
Yeah, we'll give it a shot here. So in the next 6 months, I think there's some good news on the interest rate horizon. We should see the economy slow down. Either we're in a recession or headed for a recession. They keep moving the goalposts. The definition used to be 2 quarters of negative GDP. Now they use, an average methodology on GDP, and the referee or the umpire is the National Bureau of Economic Research, who doesn't tell you were in and out of a recession until a year after. So it's not, it's like a year later's newspaper saying, oh, that's where you, okay, thanks. Now you're telling me, right? Well, whether we are in a recession affects us as individuals differently. Fortunately for the real estate and housing market, during recessions, certainly we want to be empathetic to those who will suffer during recession by potentially losing their jobs. So the unemployment rate does go up. You do have interest rates slowing because economic activity slows. That causes inflation to come down, and longer term rates like mortgages follow inflation. So it creates a favorable rate environment. I don't think we're going to go back to 2 and 3% rates, but a 5% rate environment, I think, is very realistic around there. Who knows where it's going to be exactly and for how long. But we, at that level, have incomes going up, so affordability improves. And then what you're going to see is you're going to see more buyers come out into an environment that has very tight inventory. So housing, which has done extremely well in 8 out of the last 9 recessions because rates come down, should have another good period of time, even in recessionary conditions. The media gets it wrong, but the last time housing didn't do well was a time frame you and I remember, the Great Recession, but builders were putting up too many homes and there were not enough household formations. There was a precipitous drop in households being formed. And that's because birth rates from 33 years before that dropped dramatically. And statistical reason for that is abortions were legalized. So, I'm not giving any pros, cons, or whatever. I'm just a statistical references. 1973 abortions were legalized. Birth rates dropped due to that. And then 33 years later, there were less 33-year-olds, which is the median age people move out and get their own place. So there was fewer households being formed. At the same time, builders put up more homes than they ever had before. So here we are now. And when you take a look at inventory available, there was 4 million homes available back in 2007. Today, there's 1.14 million homes available, with population increasing by 30 million. So it just is, it would be almost impossible to see a bubble. It doesn't mean that in certain markets you couldn't see prices come back down a little bit, but you will see activity increase as interest rates come down to a more manageable level, which they should, because inflation has come down. So all these spell for me a good opportunity in real estate, a tougher environment in the stock market. And because I'm just going by history here, stocks don't usually like these types of environments. Interest rates do like these types of environments. Housing does like this type of an environment. So to me, it spells a really good opportunity for real estate. I'm not expecting 20% appreciation or 18% like we saw, but I do anticipate reasonable appreciation, low single digits, mid single digits, depending on the market you are. And that can create a tremendous amount of wealth compounded over time. So people should feel really good about their investments that they made in housing. But if they were hesitant about it, you have to see the future before it becomes obvious, right? And an opportunity is only an opportunity, not because everybody's jumped in. It's because you were able to see 2 or 3 steps down that chessboard, or understand that, okay, so we want to make an investment in real estate because we want to live there. It's going to be great. It's better than renting. It affords a lot better things, but we want to make sure our investment's secure. So will prices rise or will they drop? So fundamentally, tight inventory and greater demographics on the household formation side. So that should make prices rise, but it is interest rate sensitive. Higher interest rates go, the more people hibernate instead of making that purchase. So what causes mortgage rates to go up and go down? It's inflation. What causes inflation? Greater economic activity causes inflation. Slower economic activity causes inflation to subside. We're seeing slower economic activity. Fed hiking rates is actually causing slower economic activity. The media gets it wrong. You alluded to this earlier. Said, okay, the Fed's hiking rates, so mortgage rates are going up. The confusion comes this way. The Fed hiking rates does not directly affect mortgage rates. It's a short-term overnight lending rate, but it affects a lot of other things: personal loans, business loans, car loans, which can affect the economy. Somebody looking at a car payment 9 months ago and looking at one today, it's dramatically different. So therefore, they're more hesitant to buy today. That slows economic activity in just one aspect of the economy. So all these different aspects, millions and millions and hundreds of millions of people, affect this. So now when we take a look at what the Fed did initially, started hiking rates, but those rate hikes didn't get their arms around inflation. So you saw Fed rate hikes and mortgage rates also went up. That means when Fed rate hikes, mortgage rates go up? No. What you saw just recently is that the Fed's hiked rates by 125 basis points, 1.25%, but mortgage rates came down 1%. Why? Because the market sees that Fed rate hikes have finally corralled and they've gotten their arms around inflation. So they are strangling the economy, strangling inflation. So with each subsequent rate hike from here, mortgage rates will come down more as the Fed actions now curtail inflation with their arms around it.
How many more times do you think that they're going to need to hike before they've overdone it?
They're going to hike again on February 1st. And depending on the data that comes out, which I think will make them go to 0.25%, and then mid-March would be their next meeting. And in mid-March, I believe that it's a toss-up whether they stand pat or do another quarter. I think that's a coin flip, but we will see. We will see. What is interesting is that in the core CPI, 39.3% of that core CPI is shelter costs. And the way that shelter costs are viewed, it's a lag. I mean, somebody who renewed their lease 10 months ago might be experiencing an 18% jump versus somebody who's renewing their lease today experiencing a 4.6% jump, or a 4 or 5%, let's just say, right? So in real time, rents are only up at 4%. But the way the Fed's looking at it based upon core CPI or PCE, whichever one they want to look at, it's closer to 12% rise, okay? Because they're kind of taking that sort of in averaging because of the lag effect. So over time, you start getting rid of these higher numbers and you start seeing the lower numbers. We get to February and March's data, and now all of those shelter costs start heading lower. Right now, you have, it's kind of like the roller coaster. At the peak of the roller coaster, part of the roller coaster is heading down, and the bottom is heading up. Well, the way it's showing in CPI, it's pushing it higher, but in real time, it's decelerating. Come January, February, you'll start to see all of that coming down. So inflation will come down faster, which is why we think in the first half of the year. So to answer your question in a very long way, we think that the first half of the year sees mortgage rates around 5%. And don't forget, another aspect is the spreads. You take the 10-year treasury compared to the 30-year fixed rate mortgages. It's not a day-by-day thing, and it's not in lockstep, but there's a normal relationship of around 1.75% to 2%. Call it 2%, right? So if the 10-year treasury is at 5, mortgage rates at 7, 10 years at 3, mortgage rates at 5. So the 10-year treasury did get a little over 4, and mortgage rates got a little over 7. That's a 3% differential. Why is that? Because part of the value of a mortgage, remember, the greater the value, the better the price, the lower the rate. We all know that relationship, like a seesaw, right? Price goes up, rate goes down. Part of what was pushing price up is the servicing value. Now, we know nobody holds a fixed rate mortgage, but the duties of that fixed rate mortgage, like collecting the payments, paying the taxes, paying the insurance, sending you a note if you're late and telling you please pay up or answering your questions, those duties have to be performed. That mortgage has to be serviced, which is why a servicer gets paid to do this. And that servicing fee can be kind of calculated to say, okay, we think this mortgage is going to last 6 years, 7 years, 5 years, whatever. And that monthly fee times that, that's the servicing value. That's part of the price, which keeps the rate lower. The value, higher price, lower rate. Well, the smartest money out there is agreeing and saying, we don't think that these 7% loans or 6.5% loans are going to remain for a very long time on the books, which is why all the servicing value has been sucked out, which is why instead of being 2% above the 10-year treasury, they're 3% above the 10-year treasury. But they've come down since, as the 10-year treasuries come down. And when it came down to around 3.5, mortgage rates were around 6.25. So it dropped quite a bit compared to where we were. Now, the 10-year treasury is taking a little bit of a bump up. I wouldn't read too much into it because it's going to vacillate. And right now, holiday week is when we're recording this. It's kind of thin. I think as inflation numbers continue to come back favorable, 10-year treasury will come down, but mortgage rates will come down faster than the 10-year treasury as servicing value gets added in, because a 6% mortgage will be on the books longer than a 7 and a 5 longer than the 6. How do we get to 5%? I think the 10-year treasury gets to 3, maybe a little under 3, take 2% above that. Mortgage rates should be around 5% and resume a more normal relationship. So that's why we think we'll be there. 12 months out, black swan events, things that we can't see on the horizon. It's hard to forecast. We might actually see rates go up a little bit as our debt shows that we've increased. We just passed a $1.7 trillion spending package. The market did not like that. Rates started to move up once that was passed in the Senate. So I think that we'll have a window of opportunity where rates probably get to around 5, but then maybe they kind of drift up a little bit from there. I don't think they go too far below 4.5 or 5.
First of all, everybody should just watch that like 10, 12 times, take notes, practice in the mirror, use your tape recorder like Barry and I used to when we were sportscasting. I mean, thank you. I followed you. I hope everybody else followed you. I have a couple of quick questions. So that lag that you're talking about, I'm curious, is that lag something that also had the Fed saying that we weren't really in any type of an inflationary environment because they weren't?
The famous transitory word, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The T word. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
The analogy is driving down the highway, looking at the rearview mirror. Because remember, when the Fed hikes rates or cut rates, nothing happens that day. 30 days later, when you get your bill, you see the change based upon the rate. And 30 days after that, when you make your payment, you feel it. So it takes 2-3 months for a Fed change to be filtered into the economy and felt where it's got an impact. So 2 to 3 months. So they're making policy decisions which are going to be in effect 2 or 3 months down the road. But when they're driving down the road, they're looking in the rearview mirror. It's a very dangerous thing when you're driving a sports car like the US economy to be driving that way. And as you said, Tim, you perfectly, that's exactly what caused the Fed to think that inflation was transitory, because as inflation went from roughly 1% to 4%, they were looking at data in the rearview mirror and they weren't looking at real time. That lag effect had them saying, it's not so bad. It's still okay. Even though the month by month was going up, they were like, oh no, it's transitory. It's going to pass because the year over year number wasn't as bad. And they didn't pay attention to what was happening in real time.
Hold on a second. How the fuck does that happen? Okay. These are supposed to be the smartest guys and gals in the room when it comes to the economy. How is it that they're not looking at the data in the way that you're describing? Like what's happening there for them to be like disagreeing perhaps with you, or it can't be a naivete. I mean, it's got to be like either a disagreement in philosophy, but what's happening there?
They just don't have any real world experience, unfortunately. We did this exercise at MBS Highway. We looked at the history of all the Fed members, and almost all of them, except for 2 of the 19 Fed members, 17 of the 19 Fed members either worked at the Fed their whole life, in government their whole life, or government and teaching their whole life.
Wow.
So no lemonade stand, no newspaper route, no ever having an understanding of how a sale takes place, marketing, understanding the changes in consumer behaviors. They don't get it. So all they have is, what does the Excel spreadsheet say? That's all they have. So their life is an Excel spreadsheet where they're getting this from. And data is great. Listen, data is wonderful. What data does not do is it does not capture inflection points. If things are the same for a long time, data is wonderful and data is important always. But when there's an inflection point, the data tells you what happened, not what's happening or what's about to happen. And you need instincts and experience to get that, which they don't have.
That's shocking to me. I mean, it's really shocking to me, but I fully accept your answer as truth. I guess it kind of makes some sense, right? Because to a great degree, I would imagine that the Fed has like more of a political angle to it than anything, right? I mean, there is definitely politics at play in terms of who gets appointed to the Federal Reserve, correct?
They're supposed to be independent, but people are human, right? So, yeah. I mean, there's those famous pictures of Lyndon Johnson, who was, I don't know, what was he, like 6'5", and you had the Fed chair, William McChesney Martin, and he's got him like where he's got his hand up against the wall, and here's William McChesney Martin like this, and Lyndon Johnson's just like intimidating figure, telling him what to do. And this happens a lot with, it's not supposed to happen, but people are human, we're human beings. We screw up.
So we've got 6 months out, roughly, maybe sometime around late spring, April, May. You're thinking that we're in the mid 5s, low 5s, maybe even tick into the high 4s. Is there going to be, will the yield curve normalize? Are ARMs going to be maybe a part of the equation? And will there be, service release to where there's like, no points loans can be done? And because right now that's a tough component of the equation as well. What do you see happening there?
You bring up so many good points. Let's just take them one at a time. We'll go backwards. The service release premium, 0-point loans. The reason why they're so difficult is because I know that people call it a par loan. It's not par. Par means it's sold at 100% of value. The customer's paying 0 points. The customer is not a par loan. That loan is sold so that the loan originator and the mortgage company can make money above par. So it's not sold for 100%. It's sold maybe 102%. So 102. So you take that 2%, and that's how you guys, company gets paid, expenses get paid, the loan officer gets paid. That's how we make money. But somebody's got to be willing at a 0-point loan to pay 102%, which means that they have to get something in return. What they get in return is a higher yield. They're not getting 2% higher. That's a lot more than it used to be, but maybe it's like 1% higher, which means maybe it's 1.25% higher, which means they got to keep that loan on the books for like a year and a half, 2 years. The market is hesitant to do that because they don't think these high rates will last a year and a half, 2 years, 2.5 years. They believe that that loan will refinance earlier than that, in months, not years. Therefore, why would I lay out 102% of the loan where I'm only going to get back 100% of it, and the difference I'm picking up in yield isn't going to compensate me? So I'm not in the business to lose money. So I want to make it painful for you to think about doing a 0-point loan or not do a 0-point loan at all. In a way, it's good news. It means that the market is going to improve. And the things that we had talked about together on this call with regards to the market, the smartest money out there is seeing it the same way. The other point that you brought up is the yield curve. I don't think that the yield curve gets back to normal anytime soon, because I think inflation comes down, which brings longer term rates down. So the longer end of the curve tilting lower, while the short end of the curve is going to be very influenced by the Fed funds rate, which although now is 4.25 to 4.5, probably 4.5 to 4.75 as of February 1st, might get up to 5%. The Fed may want that psychological 5 in there just so they said they did it. Again, these are human beings. And right now, if you were to go to the history of Fed chairs, you would probably say Burns, Miller, and Powell could be named as the 3 worst Fed chairs in our history. It's not something you want to have on your tombstone. Jerome Powell doesn't want that. And in the early 1980s, it was believed, like 79, it was believed that Arthur Burns killed inflation, but he came off of it too early and inflation came back. And then Paul Volcker, as the Fed chair, really had to take the sledgehammer and kill inflation for good. I don't think that Powell wants to do that. Like, okay, we think we killed it, now we're going to ease off. So I don't think the Fed's going to be in the mood of cutting very rapidly until, and unfortunately, because they really probably should be thinking about stopping the hikes, until we see the economy go through a lot of pain, where you get the unemployment rate moving up towards 5%, the economy really slowing down. And then I think that the Fed perhaps, thinks about thinks about cutting, but I don't think until that happens that they will.
I mean, it makes total sense. I mean, if they can't even rhetorically, even if they feel like it's getting close to the end, I don't think that they can even afford to speak that right now, because if they do, my sense is the market goes bananas, stocks skyrocket, at least in the near term, and mortgage rates drop and people rush to the streets because there's this war chest of pre-approved buyers just wanting to run out there, and there still isn't that much inventory, and everything gets unwound and all the work that they've done so far to try to slow it down. So it's a pretty delicate dance, right? Is like they're kind of like playing with the gas pedal and the brake at the same time and trying to figure out how to ease into it as best they can.
It's very well said, Tim. That's very well said. You nailed it.
So then going out like a year, I could totally understand. So you think that actually plays off of what I was just saying now that I think about it. So you think that, they start to take their foot off the gas. It starts to slow the economy. I mean, it starts to drop rates because the economy is starting to slow down, but it could also maybe 12 months out start to heat up a little bit again. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, it could be that the economy starts to be resilient and perks up, and you could see some inflationary pressures come back a little bit.
But a 5.25%, 5.5% market is still a healthy market.
Yeah, you're so right. And the thing that people forget is there's another component in all this, in affordability, and it's incomes. Now, ADP measures 25 million records, and they show that incomes went up 7.6% a year. And I know that when we look at other numbers, you say, well, it seems like they're going up 5%, but that's 5% across the board. Look, God bless that person who's 17 years old working at a fast food restaurant. One day they'll be a homeowner. It's just not today. If you take out the bottom quartile of income earners who are not going to be home buyers today, the income levels are going up at a much higher rate. We've done all these exercises. And if you take that 7.6% on income and you start taking that out a year or two, then you negate all of the affordability issues. And especially if mortgage rates do come back down towards 5% in that range, the math that we're showing is you actually make the market more affordable in 2023 at some point in time than it was in 2021. And the inventory levels haven't changed. So, it tells me it's a good opportunity in real estate. But people don't take those 3 steps down the road. Just take what the media says, and that's it. It's not affordable. Well, we're not always going to be, we are in motion. And that's the way to look at it we're at we taken a picture of where we are today. And people use the word housing recession. It's not a price recession. Last 2 years, we've gone up 39.5% in value. And we've come down, guess what? 3% since then. Now that 3%, if you were to eliminate the highest price homes, it's 1%. Because if you take the FHFA numbers, we've come down 1%. If you take the Case-Shiller numbers, which include the FHFA numbers are only conforming loan amounts. The Case-Shiller numbers is all mortgages. So it's all in the higher priced end, okay, where there was a little more air in there. So for most of us, 80% of the marketplace, you've seen 1% come down after almost 40% move up. Hardly a housing bubble. And if mortgage rates come down, you will still see the numbers be good, but they hear housing recession. Okay, activity's down 38% year over year. In activity, yes, it has slowed. No question. It's hard. If I got a 3% mortgage, I don't want to give it up and go to 6.5 or 7, but I might give it up to go to 5. And if I'm home with mom and dad, I've got a little sticker shock at 7, but there's only so much time that I want to stay with mom and dad. I want to get my own place. So maybe when it comes back down to 5, I will move. So I think that things change in the next 6 months and the housing market looks better. Plus seasonality. December, look, Tim, since you and I originated for a lot of years and we've been in this game, probably collectively, it's going to be scary. But I think between you and I, if you ever think about it and do the math, I think we got like 60 years experience between you and I. How fucking crazy is that? If you think about in our experience, we know that the slowest times are November, December, January in the marketplace, right? So you're piling onto this a slow period of time. And yeah, of course, it feels like will this never end? So getting back to my point, there's a picture we've taken. It's a snapshot. It's not a video. It's a snapshot. And this snapshot, just like when somebody captures a picture of you, if it wasn't the most flattering, it's not you. You just had a silly face on, right? That just you were in the middle of so whatever it was. This is not a flattering picture that's out there right now. But let the video run a little bit and the picture will get a lot prettier.
So I feel like based upon what you just shared, there's a couple of things that are super critical for originators to be focused on right now. When you listen to this in January of 2023, number one is, and to me, this is the most important one, is what is your plan to nurture your pre-approved database? Like to me, like the numbers are staggering, man. Like, I was coaching a client the other day who was wanting to put out a video to his pre-approved borrowers. We were talking about whether it should be one video at all or 75 different custom videos. I think we both know that 75 is going to be custom videos is going to be better. Does he want to make the time for it was the question. And what do you say? But I said, let's just, he's like, I don't know if I should do 75 custom videos. I'm like, okay, let's just do the math for a second. How much, what percentage of those people do you hope to capture? And he said, 90%, they're all approved. So, all right, you got 80. We'll just say you've got 80 people, or excuse me, 65 people out of your 75, they're going to close with you, just to pick a round number. How much is each deal worth? He said anywhere between 8 and 12 grand. I said, okay, so an average of 10 grand. I said, so what you're telling me is you have $650,000 of future income waiting for you. What's the fucking plan, man? Because you cannot lose those deals. That's one thing that every originator needs to be thinking about right now. Using, and I would love for you to comment and maybe even comment on a little bit about some suggestions of like what to say to those people on a monthly campaign that stays in front of them. And then the other thing, and we don't need to go down this rabbit hole, but the traditional sources of business. Now's the time to capture, and connect with a few new realtors that you don't have. It's the time to be talking to CPAs who are getting ready to sit down and probably already have started if they're doing good forward tax planning. And at the end of the year, sit down with their clients, talk to them about whether or not, is a good time to buy a home. If it's a good CPA, they're advising their clients proactively. So going back to what you were saying at the very beginning, like how about giving them some educational information so they can sound informed and intelligent on the topics that you're an expert on, that they're not, but that they need to kind of be, because they don't want to lose credibility with their clients when they're preparing taxes. So CPAs, realtors, builders, That's what it's all about right now. And this pre-approved buyer war chest. What thoughts do you have on that, Barry? Thanks for listening to today's show. And before we wrap, I want to remind you about the Complete Referral Partner Success System, a step-by-step process with over 3 hours of scripted videos that teach you exactly how to go about cultivating new referral partner relationships that will significantly increase your leads and grow your business for the long term. Learn the secrets used by top producers. Many of them are my coaching clients, and the strategies that I use successfully as an originator myself. You're going to learn how to nail the first meeting, that precious and important meeting that you have with that potential referral partner for the first time. You're going to learn how to cross-sell every listing agent on the transaction, and you're going to discover how to stop selling and start connecting and start building long-term relationships. There are over 20 powerful scripts educating you on exactly what to say, provided both in video and written transcripts. And for podcast listeners, we have a special offer. For a limited time, you get 50% off. Normally, RPSS is $899, and to podcast listeners, it's only $449.50. Use the link in the podcast description for more information and get your 50% off discount, or go to www.performance-experts.com. I hope you enjoyed today's show, and we look forward to future episodes that educate you and help you in the growth of your business.
So I think very specifically right now, we have to understand what's the mindset. So the media has given them all this negativity, so they're fearful about moving forward. Realtors do not have an answer. And at the same time, here's what's occurred. And this is potentially one of the more detrimental ones, is that a customer got pre-approved, maybe by you, and they went out and the realtor showed them homes in that price range. Let's pick a number. $700,000 price range, because you pre-approved them for that, right? But you did that when the rate was like 4 7/8 or whatever it was, 5%. So now they've seen those types of homes, but maybe they got beat out because the market was so hot or whatever. Maybe they've seen those types of homes, but it wasn't a right fit for them. But they've seen those types of homes. So they were in that market. Today, because rates have gone up, it has a very dramatic impact on the amount that they can qualify for. A 1% differential in rate can dramatically take someone who was at, this is the max you can qualify for, to now think about it. You do the math on it. Okay, that could be $100,000, $150,000 less that they qualify for today. So now they really aren't enthusiastic. They've got all this negativity in the media, and now they're settling for a home that they barely like. Why do it, right? So here you come to save the day. Because what you're going to do is, all this chaos has now created an incredible opportunity to showcase your knowledge and experience, and to give you the opportunity of fulfillment in yourself in really giving people great advice. All of them need you more than they ever have. Here's what I would say. I would say that you have an opportunity today, because the housing market is going to improve. People just don't see it yet, but all the reasons we talked about on this call, low inventory environment, rates are going to come down. So prices are going to improve. But now, with this ugly picture that we took about the market and all this negativity, let's use it to our advantage. Because now we can do something we haven't been able to do in a long time, and that's negotiate. So I can get the home of my dreams, but I can get it on sale. So I can buy it at a cheaper price. But wait a second. While most people will say, okay, I'll take the lower price. No, don't take the lower price. I'm going to show you how to parlay that into much more, which is that will give you more value than the realtor's getting paid, than you're getting paid. So what you're doing here is you're creating value by showing them mathematically that it is not in their best interest to take the price reduction. Mathematically, take that differential and utilize it for either a 2-1 buy down or permanent buy down. Here's what those two things will do. If you choose the permanent buy down, another opportunity. Tim, you mentioned earlier that if you went with a 0-point quote, you have to, if you can get it, it's very costly. It's very dear, right? But if that customer would pay points, you can get a disproportionate benefit from what we're accustomed to, because the more points you pay, the faster you buy the rate down, much more than it used to be, right? Today. So don't look at it as the negative, look at it as the positive. You might say, well, the customer doesn't have the points to pay, or they've been indoctrinated. They don't have to. The seller will give them the points. Don't take the price reduction, take the seller contribution. You could probably buy a rate down to the low 5s, 5.25%. Get the home of my dreams today at a discount. get the rate that I want today. And then next year, I can either refinance or I can put myself in a position where I'm sitting back and watching homes appreciate, but I got a deal on it because now when rates normally come down to 5, the horde of buyers is unleashed in a tight inventory environment. And that's the definition of an opportunity that you have to see. Or you could take a 2-1 buy down. Use some of that for a 2-1 buy down. Use the balance of it to pay your closing costs because you'll probably have money left over. Use that because the seller doesn't care. They're making a concession of whatever it is, $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. They don't care. It's your money to use. Use it for the buy down. Use it to pay off your closing costs or a portion of your closing costs. And then next year, when rates come down, you use the unused portion of the buy down because it's like a side account. It's not lender paid, it's borrower paid. So if you refinance a year from now or 7 months from now, that comes back to you, the borrower. Use that money to pay for your refinance. So you get the home of your dreams today, a cheaper rate than market today. You refinance for free next year, and then you watch prices go up and you sat back and got it at the deal that no one else can get. This is what I would be doing right now and explaining people to do right now. And by the way, in MBS Highway, we created a tool that shows you mathematically why payment is always cheaper. But even if you sold your home at any period of time, there's only a 6-month window where the price break would be better. For the first year and a half, it's better to take the 2-1 buy down. Then for the next 6 months, price break. And then from years 2 to 30, the permanent buy down is your best choice. You should not take the price break.
Absolutely fantastic mic drop moment. I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about before, mastering this presentation, practicing it, really perfecting it. I can't imagine you having a better ROI when we're talking about the kind of potential income that is sitting there to you, to really cement the relationship, to really create separation from any potential competitor that's crept into the equation over the course of the last 6 months while they've been sitting there, or 9 months or whatever it is. I feel like a really good way to go about doing this would be to practice this and develop a true presentation on it that is tight and really good and that has good visuals. And I would probably send that to everyone in an email and try to make it 10 minutes or so or something like that, which is about how long Barry's presentation was just now. Maybe it's a little more, maybe it's a little less, and call every one of them individually and get them on the phone and say, listen, I'm sending you an email right now that's really important. You know, I know what's going on out there. I know that what the media is promoting. I know how it can be frustrating and you can feel defeated and all of these types of things. And I want to address some really important issues. My job is to be a guide to you, to be an investment guide. And my job has never been more valuable and important than it is right now, because if I'm really doing my job the right way, I'm going to help you actually make a lot of money, which is not what people think of when they think of a mortgage professional. They think of a debt provider, but I actually can be a wealth creator for you right now in a pretty big way because of what's going on in the market. And I want you to watch this video. I mean, really tantalize them with some powerful words like that. So there's no way they're not watching that video if you deliver something like that. And then nail the freaking presentation, man. And then, you know, then show your realtors what you just did. Then make sure that everybody that watched it, you're calling the realtor that referred you to that person and saying, hey, I just want you to see what I sent to these 3 pre-approved buyers that we have together. Okay. You should probably give them a call and check in with them and see how they're doing. Let's get them out there this spring. There are going to be opportunities that we need to take advantage of. Man,
by the way, Tim, we did that in Presentation Expressway too. We recorded it and we have it in Presentation Expressway with the visuals. We have that because that's an MBS Highway. Because of that exact reason, Tim. I mean, you're so right. That's what people need to be doing. So we try to make it as easy as possible. Now, we give you an example of how we would do it. You have to do it, but you have the ability of rewinding it. And look, the reason why it was easy for me to talk about and say is because I've gone through it so many times. I've done it so many times. And then we try to do that. So it gets back to like always trying to be better. So when we saw this opportunity coming, there wasn't a tool within MBS Highway that could do this or illustrate it. So what did we do? We created it. So I love when people see where there's something missing and do it. So I always try to do that. When we saw that 1 out of every 6 transactions was an investment property, we said, there's no way to evaluate an investment property well. Scour the internet. There's not one. So what do? We just created one. And these are the types of things that you need to be doing. Whatever the void is that your customer is experiencing. Tim, you've talked about this. I know you teach this, is when you get the feedback from your customers and you're hearing a repeating theme over and over of what they're talking about, what they're worried about, that's the video you create. That's what you want to do. You want to address the concern that's out there. You have a very unique opportunity because your finger is constantly on the pulse. Use that and fill the void. That's the fastest path to success, is give people what they need. And you're hearing what they need. Now, all you got to do is just create it.
God, and my head's spinning right now. Also, like if you could just nail that 12 minutes, like make that like your January commitment to yourself, is that I'm going to nail this 12 minutes or whatever it is, watch the MBS Highway video, take notes, practice, create my presentation. Not only should you be sending that out to all your pre-approved buyers, but this is the conversation that you want to have with any realtor that you don't currently work with. Is your current loan originator sharing this with your clients? And if not, why? And let's talk about why I should be sharing it with your buyers, and start stealing those pre-approved buyers from the other originators who haven't been calling them over the last 6-9 months, because you actually have the education to give to them that's incredibly important right now. Man, first of all, thank you. I want to pivot just a little bit to, thank you, period. Like, I hope you can really,
thank you.
This was everything that I hoped that it would be, and more, in the sense that we laughed a little. We probably didn't laugh as much as I think that we gotta be.
We've got plenty of time to get silly. Right now,
we got a B- on the laugh part of the show, but on everything else, it was an A+. Like getting to know you a little bit better, learning about networking, which is just a topic that I think is so important right now. Certainly learning about the market. But there are people that are listening to this, surely, that are not mortgage professionals, and I think that they have to be incredibly intrigued about how to get to know you better. So, you have a book that you've written. You have, you've done a lot of other things. So how do you, where do you want to send people? Where should we be telling them to go to find out more about Barry?
Instagram is IamBarryHabib.com. I put out a lot of short content videos that I think you'll enjoy, that you can share, that I try and put things out that are inspirational and uplifting, but I also try and put out some very good information in little 30-second clips that people seem to be enjoying and sharing and spreading around. So I hope that you decide that you want to take a look at those. I hope that you take a look at the book, Money in the Streets. I talked about a few things from Money in the Streets here, but Money in the Streets is about finding opportunities. It's about overcoming adversity. It's really a book that I think will help you feel good about the future.
And obviously, if you're a mortgage professional, can't speak highly enough about MBS Highway. If you don't have MBS Highway, that's a big miss, very, very directly. Because not only is it going to be valuable to you as it relates to being able to be tapped into the market and knowing when is the right time to secure your client's interest rate and all of those types of things. But my goodness, there's just so much incredibly valuable educational material and presentations and things of that nature that you need right now. You need it more than anything. So if you're not a subscriber, you need to be. They can, is there a URL, or do they just type in MBS Highway? Do you want
just MBShighway.com? But listen, thank you for that, Tim. We try every day. We try and push ourselves every day. We want to make a difference for people. So we hope you take a look at it. And I think that if you do, you'll find that there is a lot of value there.
I hope this isn't the only time that you're on the 360 Experience.
We got to do this. We got to do this more. I loved it. I loved it. It's a privilege to be with you. I think you're brilliant. I love your passion. I love how great of a teacher you are. I love how great of a listener you are. You have developed into an incredible interviewer as well. And and you're also a great friend, bro. You're a great friend because, and I could tell you that from firsthand level, but you are so unselfish. You're a connector. You always look at relationships and you say, okay, who can I put you in touch with, or how can I help this person, or how can I? You just do that naturally. I mean, God bless you. You're a great man, and I'm proud to call you a dear friend. And I thank you. It's a privilege to be on here with you.
Thank you very much. And look forward to seeing you in the spring when we're together at one of our retreats. Very much looking forward to having you as our teacher there. And there's just a whole bunch of questions we didn't get to today, so don't be surprised if I hit you up for another conversation a few months down the road. And thank you to everybody that has tuned into this episode of the 360 Experience with my guest, Barry Habib, and my guest and friend, Barry Habib. And I just want to wish everyone a really terrific start to your 2023. Thanks, everybody, very much for listening.